Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Rogers. I'd like to call to order the Appropriations Committee meeting of April 4th, 2024. A little bit of extra reading here is this open meeting of the Northborough Appropriations Committee is being conducted in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Northborough Appropriations Committee are allowed to participate either in person or remotely. The Act allows Northborough Appropriations Committee to meet in person and remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream or the recording of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. To support the hybrid bit, let's just check everybody's microphone and can make sure you can be heard. So Bob D'Amico, here. George Brinkle,
Here.
Janice Height,
Here.
Tim Kalin,
Here.
Jeff Knight,
Here.
and Jason Little, our finance director.
Here.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody, for that. First order of business is public comment. So I'll look around the room here for any hands raised or any virtual hands raised. I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on. No meeting minutes to review tonight. The main elements for us to do is to review our draft report to see if there's any changes there, as well as vote on the financial-based articles. It's an opportunity before we get into the details of the report and the articles. We had some questions that were out to some of the various departments. It's a check-in with you all. If there was any outstanding questions or any additional information that we need to talk about before maybe some of the specifics of the articles, but if there's anything that you saw as outstanding, this is a good opportunity to make sure we've got any lingering action items identified. We can get the answers back. Let me start with you, Jeff. We had some DPW questions.
We did.
Saw the answers come back on that.
Yes.
Did that give you everything you needed?
It did. I'm all set.
That's great. Yeah, and some good discussion or good questions and answers back and forth, set the context for some of things and going forward there. Tim, anything outstanding from your side?
No, I'm good.
Great. Janice, for you?
No, thank you.
Bob?
No, I'm good.
And George?
Yep.
All good. I'll let you know that I do have a set of questions out to the school superintendent. I just was looking for some background information on the solar power purchase agreements. I hadn't been able to track all the discussions that the school committee may have had and school administration would have had, so I asked them more about the background that led them to looking at a power purchase agreement as the format, a 20-year lease versus other durations. Nothing that would prevent my deliberation or vote on the specific article, but just more informative to see how they got their solar powers and private interest of mine, and so I'm interested in how the school is arranging or got to their recommendations there. All right, so no outstanding questions or whatnot. That's good. What is probably maybe the longest is the repetitive nature of going through each of the articles and taking our vote. So if you don't mind, I'd like to do that part first and then step back and look at the report as a whole. Go through the individual articles first. So you'll see there's a summary kind of table. 57 is the page number in the packet. It's about 6 or so pages in. So that gives us tabular summary of the items that we need to vote. Specifics in terms of more detailed information, and the bullet points are in the subsequent pages. And if needed, both Jason and I have a copy of the warrant meeting packet. We got a printout of that, so if we needed to delve in the specific language of the warrant article that isn't reflected in kind of the summary and the bullets here, we can. And this version also has the proposed motions that would be made at town meeting. So as we get into an individual article, if we need to look up any of that information, there's questions, we have it. To set the stage a little bit, this is very repetitious, so I want to be careful that we don't get into just a rut. And if there are questions on any individual articles, if I don't call for discussion, please remind me that, and if we have any discussion, we'll do it. But it's mostly going to be a call for a motion on the article number. I would say let's use the combination of the article number and the title, short title, just to be clear that Article 3 is prior year bills. Ask for that. Jason, in our motions, do we need to include dollar amounts, that sort of thing? Or do you think that is enough of a reference?
I think as long as we're listing which article we're talking about, we're making reference to an item that's in the packet. So
In the packet and
the
available?
reference. There'll
So
be a
that
clear
combination of the number and the title should be a sufficient index on that. I'll try to be explicit in the motion made by person, seconded by person, and call for discussion, then call for a vote. But don't let the repetitive pattern that we get into, stop any discussion if we need to discuss. But that'll just give us a framework to keep going and make sure that we are staying on track and we know which one we're talking about. So with that, buckle up. Any questions or anything before we get started? We got, what is it, 39? How many rows do we have? It's a few.
Oh, there's quite a few articles.
So we'll go through it. All right, first up, Article 3, prior year's bills. Is there a motion?
Yeah, move to approve Article 3 prior year bills.
Second?
Moved by Bob, seconded by Tim. Any discussion? All right, motion's made. I would just tweak our motions just a little bit. We're voting to recommend.
Recommend approval. Okay.
We're basically either recommending to town meeting that they should approve, or not recommending to town meeting that they should approve. So recommend
With the
approval.
exception of, I think of Article 26, which is proposed to be $0. So.
And that one's
The
gotta be
recommendation would be to pass over.
pass
the
over.
article.
Yeah, we'll make note of that. Thank you, Jason.
So you'd
Okay.
be voting yes, but be voting yes to passing over,
Yes, correct. Right.
if that makes sense.
Agreed. All right. Bear with me. It's been a long day. Okay, here we go. We've got a motion on the table that has been seconded. We'll take, a roll call vote is not required, so just all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, 6-0. Article 4, Town Budget. Is there a motion?
Move that the board recommend the approval of the town budget as presented.
Perfect. Is there a second?
Second?
I heard Tim, but saw George. I'll give it to Tim this time.
That's fine.
Any discussion on that article? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously, 6-0. Do we have a motion for Article 5, Water, Sewer, and Solid Waste Enterprise Funds?
I recommend that the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 5, Water, Sewer, and Solid Waste Enterprise Funds.
Second.
Second by George. George, thank you. Any discussion on Article 5? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Janice, how do you vote on Article 5? Excellent. Any opposed? Great. Unanimous, 6-0. Article 6, Northborough K-8 Public Schools. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve Article 6 Northborough K-8 Public Schools.
Thank you, Bob.
Recommend approval, sorry.
Any second? Janice, thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Great. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 6-0 unanimous. Recommending approval. Article 7, Northborough Southborough Algonquin Regional School District Assessment. Is there a motion?
Move that the committee recommend approval of the Northborough Southborough Algonquin Regional School District assessment.
Thank you, Janice. Is there a second?
Second.
Bob on that one. Any discussion on Article 7? Excellent. Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Article 8, Assabet Valley Regional Technical School District Assessment. Is there a motion?
I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 8, Assabet Valley Regional Technical School District Assessment.
Second?
Thank you, Tim. Motion by Jeff, seconded by Tim. Any discussion on Assabet Valley?
I kind of asked this question, is there really any choice on this whatsoever? I mean, in thinking about it, it involves 12 or 13 towns. They have a budget. The amount we pay is based on the number of students we are sending. It's almost like there's absolutely no choice in this at all, kind of thing.
I asked this question offline
Uh-huh.
and was essentially told that with the districts, with the multi-town, that they don't need all of the towns to go along. So if they get enough towns to go along, then I believe half, is it 50%?
I believe it's 50%.
So if they get
50% of
enough towns to approve it, then our assessment's the same, and even if we said no, we're still
It
paying
doesn't
the
matter.
same. It doesn't matter. So unless pretty much every town lined up to say no,
Okay,
or the majority, that's what, I asked the same question.
okay. It doesn't change anything. I just was asking about it because,
Now, that brings up an interesting situation for the regional school district in that there is only 2 towns. Would one town voting no cause?
Correct. It would cause a little more complication with the Algonquin because I believe, and again, it's been a while since I've thought about the provisions, but the provisions I believe would be that it would not pass if one of the towns voted down the budget. So I think there'd be an opportunity, there'd have to be some kind of unusual town meeting with both of the towns to hash out the differences for that district, but
Yeah. Not to put
we
the
haven't
idea
faced
in
that
its head.
so far,
Yeah.
so it's.
okay.
Yeah, on that. I know there was one additional question too. Aspet had talked about establishing their capital stabilization fund, and we couldn't remember if that included then allocating money into that fund as well as part of their budget, and it did. And so for that 250,000, ours is 16,000.
Around
is our portion.
$16,000, yes.
And give or take. So that was a question that came up. It's like, oh, new fund. Did they also allocate funds into the fund? And the answer is yes. Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? 6-0 on Article 8. Article 9, Establishment of a Stabilization Fund by Aspet Valley Regional Vocational School District. I jumped the gun on that, didn't I? Is there a motion on Article 9?
Move that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 9.
Thank you, Janice. A second?
Second.
George on the second. Any discussion?
So
Any
this
further
is
discussion?
one I struggled with a little bit. And mainly because what my concern was that because of this mandatory allocation that we have no control over and there's no discretion anywhere, I was concerned that we're opening ourselves up to just more unpredictable expenditures that we'll be forced to make, that where all the decisions underlying it are being made by just the school committee, and that we would have no, but the one thing when I asked Jason about it, and he pointed out that by law, this fund is limited to 5% of the school's budget. So, and given our allocation, so looking at this year, 250,000, we're paying 16 So I thought, okay, maybe that's not so much risk we're opening ourselves up to. But that was my biggest concern because we're seeing in a lot of instances where we're just the markets, inflation, all these things are affecting us and we have no control.
Right.
And so here's another thing that we're almost voluntarily saying, here, take some more control. And that was my concern, but I'm less concerned now
There's a cap on it.
because there's a cap and it's not very much because there's so many towns that are part of this. So anyway, that was all I just wanted to discuss kind of on the record because this was the last one for me to come to terms with.
Yeah, and the mechanism in which the school district identifies projects to use that fund then is under the discretion of the school committees or school administration, and we wouldn't have anything to say on whether something gets funded by that source or not.
I don't believe so. I don't
Yeah.
believe so.
So, to your point, Jeff, there's a measure of giving up on control on having something to say on individual projects, individual capital projects. They would be put into the fund and greenlit there without our explicit approval. But knowing that there's a cap on the fund amount then helps.
Right, because my concern is our reloading this account as they're using it. It's not so much my concern that they won't spend it wisely, it's more that we just weren't counting on this and all of a sudden, but being told about the 5% cap is what kind of brought me in line with it. Otherwise, that was tough to get there this year.
Yeah. Excellent. I think that goes to show why establishing a stabilization fund takes a vote.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, any other discussion? On Article 9 for the Asset Stabilization Fund. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Article 10, revolving funds authorization of expenditure limits.
I move to recommend Article 10 for approval on the revolving funds authorization of expenditure limits.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, George. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Article 11, Appropriations Committee Reserve Fund. Do we have a motion?
I recommend that the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 11, Appropriations Committee Reserve Fund.
Second.
Moved by Tim, second by Janice. Any discussion on that? That's our standard article for this committee, so that makes sense. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Number 12, Article 12, Building Rental Fund Provision. Is there a motion?
I move that the committee recommend the approval of Article 12, Building Rental Fund Provision.
Moved by Jeff,
Second?
second by George. Any discussion? I'd say on this one, I probably just, once again, a little context needed with our town administrator, just to kind of understand the mechanism. This one was also one from my mind that would be a good candidate for ARPA if the select board were so inclined. A $10,000 amount is a small amount. Not waiting to allow the downtown revitalization to move forward might be an appropriate use, but that's up for them. So in my mind, still moving forward on this article, but it's something that could
Scott, are we
be.
talking about the parking lot article, or are we talking about the?
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is the one
I'm
that
sorry.
allows us to collect rent and use
Strike.
the money, right? to-
I save that for 39.
So but so I'm clear, this is the provision that
Yes.
makes it easier for town council, because town council is trying to get other arrangements transferred to the town, right, to be able to collect rents
Yes.
and use the money for the upkeep of 4 West Main.
So we have our current tenants at 4 West Main and our current use, both in terms of the tenant and the use of the facility for cellular service. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I could just clarify, that the town already has the ability to create a special fund for the rental income from that building. This provision simply is to adopt a local option to carry over the balance in that fund. So it wouldn't close out. Right now, I think that there's leases that are being negotiated with the tenant in the building right now. I think that all of that legal work hasn't been settled yet, but.
So what's carried over, though, it can only be used for the upkeep of the building, right?
Correct,
Okay.
correct, yeah. That's the provision, but that ability exists now. This is simply to adopt an option to carry over the balance. Otherwise, the balance in the fund would close out to the general fund at the end of the year.
Got it.
So now you see why at the beginning I said, don't let me go too fast. 'Cause I mixed up with Article 39. So that was to protect myself as well. So Article 12, that ability to keep the funds within that, or keep the monies within that fund to be used for upkeep and not have it clear back to the general fund. All right. Any further discussion other than you all needing to keep me on track? All right. We'll take our vote. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Article 13, stabilization fund contribution. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we recommend approval of Article 13, Stabilization Fund Contribution.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on Article 13? All right, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? It passes unanimously.
Scott, I'm sorry, can I make one mention? I just looked up the law for the Regional School Stabilization Fund, and I did misspeak slightly about that, because I know some of the provisions of it changed recently. So the aggregate, and I'll just read this, I don't know if this will precede, you wanting to revote the fund, but the aggregate amount in the fund at any time shall not exceed 5% of the combined equalized valuations of the member municipalities, which that's a much higher number than 5% of the budget. So the other provision is that the amount that it includes in its annual budget for deposit in the fund is an amount not exceeding 5% of the aggregate amount apportioned in the member municipalities for the preceding fiscal year. So they can't increase their appropriation by
more than 5%.
by more than 5%. But they're limited, the limit is a pretty high limit. Just in all disclosure.
What's the ballpark on that limit, right, like, because I don't really understand what that meant.
Well, the equalized valuation of Northborough is $4.3 billion.
Oh.
If you added,
So goes the cap.
Yeah, so
Marlboro,
goes
yeah, so 5% of that is a very high number.
So the cap is really just an annual cap on how much it can climb
Correct.
based on last year's appropriation. So this year, it's 250, and that, the amount is on the total amount, because our allocation can change year to year based on enrollment changes and other changes, right? So
It's the total amount.
it's the total amount is what's limited to 5, and then whatever our share of that is what our share is. So if there's a 10-year plan by the school district to increase this fund, they could do it, but they have to take 5% at a time, essentially. Okay. And we'd have no discretion because the school committee would do that, and it would go to our
Yes.
assessment.
Correct, it would be part of their annual budget. And then allocating money from the fund would be the school committee.
School committee.
Am I doing the math? 5% on 250,000 would be 12,500?
It sounds right to me, so.
That would be, so they'd be limited to increase it by the 12,000 or so each. Well,
Next year, and then that amount goes up, but yeah. but
the
it's
escalating
each
5%, but
year. Okay.
order of magnitude. Based on that information, any need for us to reconsider? Anybody feel strongly to reconsider our prior vote? Or are we still good with recommending?
Do we have any motion open right now? We just voted on Article 13?
We just voted on 13.
Okay, so there's no pending motion, right?
Yeah, there's nothing on the table right now. So if we wanted to reconsider reconsider the Article 9, we could. It'd be a motion to reconsider.
So I have this straight, they can ask for 5% more every year. Is that basically what it is?
Hearing, and the only other cap is not really realistic, right? Because it's based on,
Right.
I'm much less comfortable now.
yeah, I am too. Could we revisit it last? Could we go through
Certainly.
all the articles?
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's come back to that one.
No, I will mark that we will come back for possible.
That's just setting
Further
up a
deliberation.
mechanism that things can grow faster than the rate of inflation, we hope, kind of thing. I'm a little bothered by that.
We'll circle back. So Article 14 would be up next for senior tax relief. Is there a motion?
I move the Appropriations Committee recommends Article 14, Senior Tax Relief.
Second?
Thank you, Bob. Any discussion on Article 14?
Just to make it clear, because if I'm understanding this right, it's an NA because we don't know, right? Because it's every individual applicant has to be, there's an analysis for each applicant. This only just makes the programs out there and available. Is that right?
Correct. It changes. There's three elements to this article. One would be the tax deferrals, which is basically a reverse mortgage for seniors. They can defer paying taxes at a lower interest rate than what like an overdue tax bill would accrue. So that part is increased, that element of it is increasing the income limit. That's a local option. So this article would raise that to the maximum at $69,000. It's the set at the seniors circuit breaker amount. The other thing would be the other two elements are I don't know. So there's a doubling of exemptions statute, and that's the one that's very complicated in that there's a provision within that law that says that the doubling provision of the exemptions, the existing exemptions that the town has by law, the doubling would not create a situation where the person would be paying less taxes than the prior year. So it's a unique calculation that has to happen for each applicant. So it's not a straightforward just doubling. And then the last part of it is adjusting an element of the senior work-off program where people that volunteer for the town can earn up to right now it's $1,500 up to apply to their tax bill, and it's paid out at the minimum wage rate for the state. So this provision adopts a local option whereby we can set the limit at 125 hours rather than 1,500, or it's been more recently up to $2,000. So our current limit is $1,500, but this would be whatever is more. $125, 125 hours at the minimum wage, or 2,000, whichever's higher.
Thank you.
And the
In
the funding for that is in the
through
abatement?
overlay.
Overlay, right?
Yeah, so annually, the amount that the town gives in exemptions is somewhere around $80,000 to $100,000. So doubling that, we've provided for that within the overlay, the provision for abatements and exemptions. That amount is conservatively high enough to cover any doubling, but it probably won't amount to doubling.
Yeah. Okay. So conservative 2X into the overlay, but not an expectation that we would need the 2X.
Right.
Excellent. Any other discussion? We've got a motion that's been made and seconded. We're ready to vote. All those in favor? Janice on exit, thank you. And I saw Bob. Unanimous, 6-0. Article 15, appropriation of funds for legal settlement for the Marlboro sewer case.
We recommend approval of Article 15, the Marlboro sewer case.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on Article 15?
I don't believe there's any settlement on the table as we speak, so I would just add that maybe reserve your vote until town meeting on this one, or say that, no information is forthcoming, because
Yeah, looking at even the
full amount.
comparison of the draft motions, right? We still don't know the actual sum. I mean, the motion is drafted as an appropriate sum. So that's still to be determined.
Yeah, we at town meeting, we would have to appropriate a specific amount. So there's no provision to have an amount that would not be a specific amount when we go to town meeting, so.
It has to be something by then. Would it be appropriate then if we've got a motion on the table, so we got to talk about amending the motion. But if we were to not render a recommendation tonight and reserve then for our meeting that will be just prior to town meeting, and perhaps we'll have then the final motion and the number, and then we can take a formal vote at that time. Would that work for everybody?
What happens if we don't have a final number as of town meeting? Would this be tabled,
Well, it would be passed over.
passed over?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we already voted on the town budget. What's the funding source? So right now it's a question mark.
Oh,
Like, how will you account for it?
So
the
enterprise.
amount of the settlement is a question mark, because we don't know what that would be, but we have enough money in the sewer enterprise fund balance for
Okay.
free cash.
Got it, okay.
So,
It won't affect the operating budget at all.
no.
Right, okay.
This would be fully funded by the sewer enterprise fund. That's the intent of the article, is to appropriate, this is the mechanism to move the money out of sewer free cash in order to pay the settlement.
Right. So over the years that we haven't had an intermunicipal agreement, we've still continued to project increases in sewer rates, knowing that this would come to pass.
Right.
And so we've built up and accumulated those funds.
Right, and
over
that's why
time.
there's more money in sewer free cash than there is in the general fund. It's about $8.5 million that's been
Yeah.
built up into that fund's free cash, so that's what it's there for.
Hoping we get to that settlement that's pending. Okay, good stuff there. So the motion we have is to recommend approval. The path we could go would be either to withdraw the motion or amend the motion to, I can't even think of a good amendment. So it might just be to withdraw the motion. Or, somebody keep me honest here, we could continue on, and if the motion didn't pass, we could then entertain to reconsider and then vote on the new number at our pre-meeting.
How about for a suggestion?
Yeah,
That
keep me straight
the
on this.
vote be to be in favor of a settlement being reached within the boundaries of what's available in the enterprise fund.
There we go.
And the committee will give its recommendation on town meeting floor should there be a settlement on the settlement or judgment reached by time of town meeting.
Okay, so one way to handle that would be to so move on the suggested amendment to the motion that Jason just described.
I'm willing to amend my motion to what Jason just said.
Great. And so, and then I just need a second on the amended motion.
Oh, second.
Thank you, George. So the amended motion is to indicate our favorability to support this article within the bounds of the monies that are available in the enterprise sewer fund, and that we would take our final vote contingent upon having the specific dollar amount available prior to town meeting. Yeah, that's how we did it. Thank you,
It's a
Jason.
mouthful, but.
But thank you for getting me,
Yeah,
keeping
yeah.
us straight on that. Any other discussion? All those in favor? That motion passes 6-1 to revisit that prior to town meeting. Okay, our next block is our capital improvement plan items. We've got quite a few here. First up, Article 16, police cruiser replacements.
Move that the committee vote to approve the Article 16 police cruiser replacement.
Thank you, Janice. Second?
Second?
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on Article 16? I'm ready to vote then. All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Article 17 for the Fire Department Engine 1 replacement.
I move that the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 17, Fire Station Engine 1 replacement.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on Article 17? Yes, Tim.
This is one of the acquisitions that require financing. I would like to recommend that the ARPA funds get used for that so that there's some reduction in the tax impact on the residents in town.
And I think on the allocating ARPA to that specific item, that due to delivery times might not meet the ARPA requirements. A possible approach would be if the select board decided to fund one of the other capital items with ARPA funds, that would free up the free cash that then could be used towards the fire, to the engine one, and thereby not have to finance that amount. So there would be a little bit of a trade or a reallocation of the free cash to make that happen. But that would be the mechanism that theoretically, select board could take a look at any of these items and fund them if they meet the schedule deadlines, and then that would free up cash for the
In this case, the risk would be that the contract wouldn't be able to be delivered by the December 2026
Right,
deadline.
and given
We
what
would
the-
need to enter into a contract, which I assume that, the wheels are in motion to sign a contract to order this truck, but, preparing for July 1st so that we can, should it be approved the way that it's written, I believe the contract will be signed on July 1st to order the truck. That's the requirement of ARPA to obligate funds, but again, the part of it that would be a risk would be the delay after the order, since
delivery.
I understand these fire apparatuses are extremely delayed. Like the one that was approved last year isn't gonna be delivered until sometime next year.
I understand this straight, that if, for whatever reason, this fire engine doesn't meet the end of the time limit, that we lose that if we assign ARPA funds to it?
It's not a clear answer. That's what I would assume that we would.
So we're not 100% sure on that, right? Okay.
Well, Treasury could change its rules.
Yeah, okay.
Under the current rules, we would.
So I wouldn't want to
I see your point.
explicitly allocate ARPA money to pay for a long lead item like this. I think it makes more sense to use the ARPA money for something that's shovel-ready or contractually ready for near immediate delivery.
Right.
But then that would free up free cash to not have to finance.
Lower the amount we need to borrow.
Or lower, either completely cover the amount needed to borrow or significantly reduce it, but anything.
And,
along that line.
I think it's important for us to also put out there, and maybe even in our final report, add some language. There's already some good, strong language in there about it, but even though the use of ARPA funds, allocating them to any particular project or expenditure is within the sole discretion of the select board. So it's outside of this committee's purview. I think this committee certainly has an obligation and an advisory role to show the Board of Selectmen where we could lessen the tax impact in the current, this upcoming fiscal year, if they can use, I believe it's more than $2 million that needs to be committed by December.
1.8.
It's 1.8.
1.8, so
short of
close to $2 million, because we do know of so many expenditures that, and we know what's coming. So I think even though we have no control over those funds, I think we have an advisory role in urging the select board to use it wisely to help us lessen the tax impact.
Yeah, Janice?
Can I ask a question of Jason?
Sure.
Jason, what happened to the funding for that fire engine last year that town meeting and both financial boards suggested using ARPA funds and the selectmen declined? How is that being paid for?
Well,
It is, I realize.
there were
it's a-
two projects were put forward as proposed to be funded with ARPA, which the select board ultimately chose not to fund those projects, so they went forward as borrowing authorizations. So, we will be borrowing for the DPW tight tank this year. The fire truck, because that's delayed, we are not gonna be borrowing for it, so we haven't incurred any costs for the fire truck. That was a borrowing authorization as well.
And the selectmen, as the board is now constituted, does not recognize that there are other opinions beside their own, and the way, if it has to be bonded, it raises taxes for everyone. I was disgusted. I could have gotten up and beaten on somebody, but I'd very much like to avoid anything like that and see that the ARPA funds are not frittered away.
What we can do then, and once get through our voting, we can look at how we might want to put some additional statements and maybe some specifics in our report. And as we go maybe through some of these other capital plan items, if it's something that you think might be a good candidate that we would want to recommend, make a note of that, and we'll update our report accordingly. Excellent. And just to say it, so the financing that almost $500,000 or $493,000 portion of the truck has a $16.50 tax impact to average.
The borrowing portion, that was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading it,
the
I'm
free
sorry, the
cash
borrowing is
portion.
746.
746,
Yeah,
746.
sorry, thank you. Yeah, so 746, the tax impact is $16 to the average single-family house property tax. So we compare that 1650 to the anticipated 609,
26 for the single-family home,
yeah, we at 626?
626, yeah.
Yeah. So it just shows you, knock 1650 off of that amount. Potential. Okay. So we have a motion made and seconded for the engine one replacement to move forward with that capital planning item. Any further discussion? We'll take our vote. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Article 18 for facilities, HVAC upgrades and modernization. Is there a motion?
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 18, Facilities, HVAC Upgrades, Modernization.
Thank you, Tim. Second. Thank you, Bob. Any discussion on Article 18? Yes, Tim.
The borrowing on the fire truck is just under $750,000. So I'd like to recommend that we use ARPA for this $250,000.
Okay, I'll make note of that. So that would be one of the bullets that we'll potentially put in the, or not potentially, that we can put in the draft report. And I just want to double check. I was just checking the comparison, so when we saw the draft warrant booklet, you'll see that what was published in the warrant article is that the funding sources had phrases like raised by taxation, transferred from available funds, borrowed or otherwise appropriated. And then the motion has the specifics of where the appropriation is coming from. So on these capital items, you'll see that it's from free cash or from enterprise funds and the like. So I was double checking that the motion has the free cash. Yes, sir.
I just also wanted to add too that the cost to the average single-family home for the fire truck is $16.50. And with the tax rate overall of $6.26, that's $16.50 is about 2.5%. So
2.5% increase, yeah.
it's a reduction in taxes by 2.5%. That's not a small, if the federal government called you and said, hey, we're going to reduce your taxes by 2.5%, I think people would be pretty excited about that. You know, so it's a 2.5% tax decrease that we're advocating for.
Thank you, Tim.
I just looked up the exact number too, Tim. So I said 626, that's where we were at one point. It's actually 614.
We are down to 614 with the
Yeah.
latest adjustments. Okay.
From a psychological standpoint, you'd knock 1,650 off of that, you're under 600.
Now you're under 600, yep.
So it's more than a 2.5%. You might be pushing a 3% reduction.
Good stuff.
A lot of psychological value to dropping it below the 100.
Yeah, would you rather pay $9.99 or $10?
Exactly. All right, for Article 18, we've got a motion on the table that's been seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Article 19, Police Station Siding Replacement. Do you have a motion?
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 19, TPW Police Station Siding Replacement.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on Article 19? Yes, Tim?
ARPA.
Okay, we'll make note of that. Right there between those two articles, you're at 790. So that would more than cover the financing on the engine.
Yep.
Got you there. Any other discussion on the siding?
So in terms of the votes, just to be clear through the chair,
Yep.
the intent of the vote is you're recommending passage of the article, but you would like it inserted into the report that you would like these articles to be paid from ARPA rather than the funding sources that are
That
gonna be
the
going forward.
select board consider
Right. Our
funding
recommendation
those
is
articles.
But you're in favor of the article regardless of the.
regardless.
Regardless, yes.
Yeah, just to make that clear. Yeah,
Yeah,
as-
the
So we'll
fire
insert
department
language
needs
into
the fire
report
truck.
that makes that request.
Yeah.
We know that our role is advisory with ARPA. We know that we have no say. But we're identifying things that we know we're gonna spend the money on, and we're gonna spend it this year. And we see it, and it makes sense. It
And
makes sense,
we'd like to lower everybody's tax bill by
Yes.
3%. Yep.
yes.
If the select board chooses not to reduce everybody's taxes by 3%, that's their decision.
Good point.
Yeah, that's their decision to do that.
At least this body's saying,
We should reduce taxes.
From a financial perspective, we shouldn't incur financial interest
Burdens.
and charges when it's not needed.
Yes.
When we have the.
Especially
cash on hand.
considering what's coming at us in terms of borrowing.
Yes, exactly.
I'm on board.
Any other specific discussion on Article 19? Great, hearing none, we'll take our vote. All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0.
Just Tim, through the chair, can I just clarify that we wouldn't be reducing taxes by 3%. We would be reducing the increase by 3%. So it's
Yes.
on the table was the $614 increases. If it goes down to $597, we've reduced the increase by 3%. But
Yes.
that would still be a 5.97%.
Yes.
increase rather than,
Yes, yeah, very good point. Thank you, Jason.
no, I just want to make sure that that was clear to
Yeah.
people, that we're not talking about a magnitude of 3% on the overall
Overall,
increase.
yeah, thank you.
Every little bit counts.
I think that's the point we're trying to make, right? Article 20, fire station brick repointing and sealing is our motion.
I move that the Appropriations Committee recommends Article 20, DPW, fire station brick repointing and sealing.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on Article 20?
You know, we're about to throw it away. I'm just, you know,
That's where I'm going.
I realize that we're still living in it, we're still using it, and I just wonder how much, it's kind of like when you have like a 20-year-old Oldsmobile, you know, are you gonna put a new transmission in it, or are you gonna, I mean, I don't know, I wonder, in light of the proposed fire station,
Yeah.
if it's a good use of money now.
How long, part of it
Right.
is how long before we move into the new fire station? And then will that building be used, or will it just be knocked down to build something else?
Or are there any conditions of
Right.
deterioration that they've seen that,
Right.
or this just preventative maintenance?
Can this be put off for a year?
Well, this was a discussion during that we had, where the fire department came in there and said that had to be done, and they knew about, they could have put it off because of the new fire station, but that this had to be done because there was and I can't remember the exact thing, but there was a problem that they had to solve right away.
I mean, right now, they're operating with a tarp on the front of the building, so there's immediate.
Oh, okay.
There's immediate.
Well, that's what I was asking.
Never
If there's,
think it was-
that's why, that was my question,
Thank
is
you.
because I don't remember that.
It
and-
was, yeah, they said that at the meet.
Okay.
So they're getting them some water infiltration at the moment.
Okay.
And they'll be there for several more years regardless, because
Yes. Right.
this building is gonna
Right.
take a while.
So this
Okay.
is- yeah.
Okay.
So I think, to be fair, my memory's a little foggy on this, but I believe that through the financial plannings process, they increased the priority of this project from a 2 to a 1, I believe, because of the water infiltration that they're dealing with.
Okay.
So just, this wasn't just to make the building look better, it's because of a actual safe and condition of the building, the
Yeah.
type of repair that's needed.
And I agree, this wasn't a tax impact article either, too, right?
Right, it's proposed to come from free cash.
Great, thank you, Jason. Yeah, there was a few articles that, as the Financial Planning Committee looked at, they adjusted the priority based on urgency and safety considerations.
And I'm all for this.
Yes.
Article now, but when we say things like, but it's just free cash or there's no tax impact, I think there's always a tax impact, because if you don't need the free cash to go there, it can go somewhere else that would reduce the tax impact. So I just want to throw that out there, that free cash is not free. That's all,
Agreed.
right?
Right.
I
It
think
was
the-
more, in my mind, it was more a timing thing. and
Me
the
too,
question of whether
me
this should
too.
be put
Right.
off for a little while.
If there's a need, let's do it. If it was just because it's preventive maintenance on a schedule or something, I'd be like, well, do we need to? But,
My point was just not to increase taxes.
right.
So I think the caveat is that in the report, it's saying with no additional tax impact. So it's not that there's none, and I think it's
Right.
and you're making a good point that they are it's taxpayers' money.
Right. It all is. Okay.
Any other discussion from the committee? And then it's taking me a while to notice, but we do have a hand up in the audience. And given that we've been talking both select board and fire station building committee items, can we let that member into the meeting?
Do you want to vote for this first?
Let me hold in case the comment is about the condition of the fire station and because we mentioned the fire station building.
Yeah, how long was that hand up?
I know, right? My apologies, not seeing that. And then this is getting accustomed to hybrid meetings.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mitch, and my apologies for taking so long to recognize you.
No problem. It's good to be perhaps the first person to test out one of these hybrid meetings remotely. I appreciate you letting me in. I did have my hand up for a while as you were, I didn't catch all of your meeting, but I caught a good part of it. I just wanted to make a a general comment from my perspective on the ARPA discussion. It is too late at this point for the select board well, this is interesting. I'm seeing myself twice. To make changes to the budget. Our last meeting before town meeting, other than the one to deal with any emergency last minute issues, has already been posted. It's for Monday night. If the Appropriations Committee had made recommendations for funding sources other than what was in the warrant, the correct time for that would have already passed. So I can't imagine there will be any consideration otherwise in advance of town meeting at this late stage, unless your recommendation is to pass over articles, and town meeting does pass over articles, and then we would, obviously have to do that. I will say that there's been some discussion about, later on this calendar year, if we find leftover money in ARPA that we don't appropriate to new items. Obviously, we're not going to throw that money back at the federal government. We could allocate some portion thereof to projects that have already been approved by town meeting, and thus those funding sources would not be needed. I'm not committing that would be the case, but that's a conceivable way of dealing with leftover money as we, get into December of 2024.
Yeah, so thank you, Mitch. So that we would have a path that if articles approved at town meeting and with the intended funding source of free cash, even after town meeting, if the select board deemed appropriate, they could allocate ARPA funding to pay for those projects.
Yeah, I'm trying not to imply that that's an inevitability or even a likelihood, but it is a possibility.
That's the path. That would be the path to take.
That would be a path that the select board could take. Correct.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's an option that would be available, I think is what it comes to.
I do worry about going through the same process that we did last year about this back and forth about ARPA. Obviously, that confused a lot of people, didn't go very well for the position the Appropriations Committee took. And at this point, given that these recommendations are not being made in a timely manner to the select board, we can't even act upon them.
Understood.
I don't think it's well constructed the way that you're making particular recommendations now. If you want to make recommendations after town meeting or do something along those lines, that's all right. But that's just my own personal thought.
Yeah, I think what'll end up happening, of course, we'll vote for the articles, as written to pay for out of free cash. But then we'll have our report that makes this additional recommendation to make sure that select board knows that this is this is under their control to use ARPA funding to pay for any of these. Well, not any of these, but pay for them that they deem. Yeah, Tim?
I think under the constricted timeframe that we've all been operating under this year, I understand that the select board, that the warrant has already been approved and can't be changed. But Mitch, you just said the select board has the discretion to allocate ARPA funds to these items afterwards. So I think we could still recommend that ARPA funds be used for these items, because that you could do that. You could take our recommendation and choose to use the ARPA funds for those things.
At some point post town meeting, right now you're making town meeting recommendations, and I fear that could confuse the body by implying something that has not even been discussed.
So I think we can carefully craft our report language
Yeah.
to make that clear, that any recommendations are in an advisory capacity intended to be implemented sometime after town meeting, but they have no impact on our recommendation for the approval of the warrant articles.
As written, yeah. Sounds good.
And I would have no problem adding your recommendations to the list of ARPA requests that have been put forward by the town administrator and the public.
Sounds good. Okay.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate it, Mitch.
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, and I don't know if you can reach, or if Jason, can you reach across just to let Mitch go back into attendees?
I don't think I can boot myself back to participant.
I tried Monday and I was unsuccessful.
Okay.
Three dots.
All right, thank you, Owen. Any other discussion on Article 20 for the fire station brick repointing? Hearing none. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Article 21, road improvements and maintenance program.
I'll move that the Appropriations Committee recommend approval of Article 21, DPW, road improvements and maintenance.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion on Article 21? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Article 22, enclosed public health trailer.
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 22, enclosed public health trailer.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on 22? Hearing none, we'll take our vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Article 23, drainage sidewalk improvement program.
I move to approve Article 23, the DPW Drainage Sidewalk Improvement Program, recommended.
Thanks, Bob. Second? Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on Article 23? Seeing none, we'll take our vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Article 24, bucket truck. We have a motion.
I move that the board recommend approval of Article 24, a bucket truck.
Thank you, Janice.
Second?
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on Article 24?
Maybe I'm confused. Was this one the one supposed to be removed in lieu of another one?
We'll see that on 26 for the hook truck.
Okay, my confusion. Thank
Yeah,
you.
the hook lift. Any others? Discussion? We'll take our vote then. All those in favor, Article 24? Motion passes unanimously. Article 25, sidewalk plow replacement.
I'll move that the committee recommend the approval of Article 25, the sidewalk plow replacement.
Thanks, Jeff.
Second?
Thanks, Tim. Any discussion on Article 25?
This is one that I had questions about to Scott, and I really appreciate his response, because I didn't really understand the need and how we're using these units. And apparently this one's not even just a plow, it also is going to mow the grass along the sidewalk and when it's not winter time, and we still have the other. So I just wanted to let everyone know that I did get a very detailed answer to that question, and I felt it more than justified that there's a real need.
It's kind of nice to see that piece of equipment has those additional attachments too, that extend it through other seasons.
Make it more useful, yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. Any other on 25? We'll take our vote then. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Article 26, the hook lift truck for the DPW.
I move that the committee recommend that Article 26, hook lift truck, be passed over.
Thank you,
Second.
Jeff. Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on that? Just thanks to the DPW on identifying a piece of equipment that could be deferred and free up the funds then to go towards the police sighting project. So that was the decision there. All right, we'll take our vote on Article 26. All those in favor to pass over, or recommend we pass over? That passes unanimously. Article 27, the one-ton utility truck for the water department. Do I have a motion?
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 27, DPW Water, 1-ton utility truck with plow replacements.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
Thanks, Jeff. Any discussion on Article 27? Great, we'll take our vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Article 28, I&I mitigation for the sewer department.
I move we vote to recommend Article 28, inflow and infiltration mitigation.
Thank you, George. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Tim. Any discussion on Article 28? We'll take our,
Is-
oh, yes.
Is that for the entire system?
I'm trying to remember how the DPW director described the different segments and parts of the system that they've in phases implemented it.
Okay,
yeah,
so
it's-
this is phase,
Third year, it says.
Yeah, third,
Mhm.
yeah.
Third year of a 15-year
15.
plan.
Yeah, there's gonna be an annual amount related to
So
this.
we'll
yeah.
see this ongoing. I know that the more critical parts, they're covering first, so the earlier phases are getting the most infiltration or the most areas that need to be in. So over time, so I think these early phases, we're really making a difference. And then we'll, because as they handle those more critical items first.
you
So
mean
it's,
the dirtiest?
yeah, the dirtiest, the most, that are
Highest volume.
highest volume. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. So they've got that prioritized need, and through the assessments that they do, run the cameras through the pipes. Any more discussion on 28? We'll take our vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Article 29 for Peasley Elementary, the asbestos
Move that we approve.
encapsulation of the chimney.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 29, the school department Peasley Elementary asbestos encapsulation dash chimney.
Thank you, Bob. Second?
Second,
Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on Article 29?
that's an awfully small amount of money for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm just reading the additional information. It's mostly taking that chimney and stabilizing it and rewrapping it. So it's a,
Still a small amount of money for that kind of.
luckily, a small amount, right? That's kind of a good thing when dealing with any of the hazardous mitigation. Great. Anything else on Article 29? We'll take our vote then. All those in favor? Motion passes for recommending approval of 29. Article 30, Melican Hot Water System Upgrade.
I'll move to approve Article 30, the school department Melican Middle School hot water system upgrade.
Thank you, Bob.
Second.
George with the second. I just wanted to check. And Jason, this is one in which the funding source is the surplus from previous article balances, basically the projects that were under budget.
Yeah,
And there
so
was
the police station sidings involving reappropriating $70,000 from a last year's article. This Article 30 and 31 are proposed to come from an older article where there's $102,000 left in the article. And these would essentially close out that article from 2011.
Good stuff there.
It's the oldest article we have on the books.
Any other discussion on Article 30? We'll take our vote. All those in favor? Motion passes to recommend Article 30. Article 31, middle school pneumatic control repairs.
I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 31, Milligan Middle School pneumatic control repairs.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on the control repairs? We'll take our vote. All those in favor? And any Thank you, Janice. That passes unanimously. Article 31. Moving to Article 32, feasibility study for Peasley Elementary School. Is there a motion?
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 32, feasibility study for Marguerite E. Peasley Elementary School.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on Article 32? Yes, Tim?
What do you think it's going to be?
The construction estimate? Is that what you're asking, what it's gonna?
This would seem like an ideal thing that ARPA funds could have been used for.
So, so the $900,000, is this being kind of fronted before the feasibility study occurs?
The $900,000 is a borrowing authorization.
Okay.
But we wouldn't be borrowing any money until the year that any expenditures were
We
to
actually,
happen.
okay,
And they're proposing, they're not looking to spend any of this money till '26. So it's
And-
likely
and-
that there won't actually be any taxpayer impact till '27.
okay. And whenever that happens, we will get state matching.
Correct, and we won't be exposed to the full 900.
Okay.
Like whatever percentage rate MSBA refunds us, it will probably be in the 50% range. So we would only borrow the balance of what we don't get grant funding for.
I think Peasley School opened in about 1964 or 5. I don't think it owes us much.
So a number of years ago, we did the renovation of the Lincoln Street School. From what I understood, this school, Peasley School, was built with the same architectural plans 2 years later.
Yes.
So this came 2 years after, so it seems reasonable that we would have another, this would be the next building project after we did the Lincoln Street School in 2015.
Any other discussion on Article 32? Okay, we'll take our vote. All those in favor of recommending approval 32? That passes unanimously. Article 33, solar PPA for Proctor. Is there a motion?
Can we postpone these until we get a number? In other words, vote on them immediately before town meeting?
I think.
I don't think, doesn't,
Yeah, is
isn't
there a
it paid from the
financial impact
energy?
or a?
Right, there was an estimate provided by the school department of the savings. I think there were some questions that were surrounding the various options that they evaluated, but they provided us with a one-year estimate, I think, of the energy savings. And this one, it's in the draft.
Yeah, so for Proctor, an estimate savings of $10,000 in energy costs is what we have for Article 33 was an estimate from the school. And I'm just looking ahead, I think each of these has their
15
estimate.
On
15 for Lincoln.
Lincoln,
It's a larger
10
system.
on Z.
And then 10 on Z. Yep. Are we likely to get any more information prior to town meeting on these? I don't think that, in this case, the motions would change, because this is the authorization to go into such an agreement,
Correct.
not necessarily the allocation of money.
This doesn't require the allocation of money, right?
Right, but because it represents a cost savings and there's a financial impact.
Right.
That's why it's kind of in scope for us to
Yeah.
make a recommendation.
Well, in practice, though, will this be almost like a revolving fund situation? Because you're gonna get the energy savings, but you're still gonna have utility bills. And so there's gonna be some outlay, and then some, I mean, but I guess that's all to be determined right after they enter into the agreement and,
Right, the power purchase agreement would typically offset the energy bills for that school.
Right.
So I think
could be a net zero.
could be a net zero, they might not pay any electric bills for the school.
Okay.
I think
Could be that during the summer months, enough is generated without consumption that there's a net, not only a net savings, but a sell back to the utility.
Yeah.
To offset the total years. And I guess the details would be within whatever agreement is negotiated. So we won't have those details until they're authorized to, enter into them, right? So it's really the article itself is giving the authorization to enter into some agreements, and then based on, they'll negotiate, the town will negotiate good agreements.
So is it the chicken or the egg?
Right. And once again, my questions to the school administration or school committee were not, oh, you shouldn't be talking PPAs, you should be talking some sort of other type of agreement. I just was looking for their background on how they reached the decision that, oh, yeah, the best approach is a PPA for 20 years. Just to have that background.
But these agreements for solar can be quite different. You can lease or buy the equipment,
Yeah.
and the cost is significantly different. I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm voting on a pig in a poke here.
So we could postpone the vote on these until we get that information from the superintendent or the school administration.
Will we then be voting on it right before town meeting?
And then we
Yeah.
would make our final recommendation right before then. We've got one we're gonna do anyway, so.
I know that
We could defer
the
these.
chair had reached out to the school superintendent, we just hadn't heard back the answers to those questions yet, so you could say the recommendation will be made at town meeting following receipt of information.
Yeah, so so the motion we would make tonight would be that,
We would table or postpone?
that, you could even say that, that we'll just postpone our recommendation vote until our meeting prior to town. So I didn't say that very well.
If we're
So
doing it
is there
that
a
way,
motion?
can we move 3 articles at one time then? It's
You certainly could in
So,
this
so
motion,
I'll
yep.
I'll move then that we postpone making our recommendation as to Articles 33, 34, and 35, which is the solar power lease and purchase agreements for Proctor, Lincoln, and Z schools respectively.
Second?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Tim. So the motion is to postpone our final recommendation until just prior to town meeting, pending getting the additional information on that. Any further discussion? Good point. All those in favor? The motion to take this up just prior to town meeting, pending additional information, passes unanimously. Article 39, authorization to fund spaces for public parking.
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 39, authorization to fund spaces for public parking.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Thank you, Janice.
I'm
Discussion.
Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
We look alike.
Thank you. Any discussion on Article 39?
40. Oh, 39, sorry.
Hey, don't put it past me that I forget. So this was one that could easily be handled out of ARPA, and that I had mentioned earlier, is that this is something that could move forward. It's a small amount. It's something that, under the downtown revitalization, other actions have taken place. So I had made note of that. And I think, I just want to read the let me just read the motion on this, just to make sure. I've got to skip past our Health and Human Services. There we go. And basically, Jason, this is a nominal amount that would allow town administration to have the discussions and take steps forward on entering into leasing arrangements with property owners along Route 20.
Under the law, town meeting is required to vote to authorize real estate transactions, so this would give the authorization more so than the $10,000 appropriation.
It's more about the
More about
authorization.
the authorization to enter into the agreement, the lease arrangement.
Okay. So really, given that it's all about the authorization, I mean, it's still the select board could choose to fund it through ARPA, but it's still an article that has to go before town meeting.
Yeah.
to get
Correct.
To get that
Permission to
leasing
do
agreement.
it.
So it's not something that they could have done ahead of time, it still need to go to town meeting. Okay, I got myself straight on that. Any other questions on 39? Great, we'll take our vote. All those in favor? That motion passes unanimously. Now we're into our block of Community Preservation Fund items. These are Articles 40 through 46. 40 is the acquisition of 432 Whitney Street. Is there a motion?
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 40, Community Preservation Fund acquisition of 432 Whitney Street.
Thank you, Tim. Is there?
Second.
Thank you, Janice. Discussion on Article 40. Yes, Tim?
I have a lot of concerns about this. It's not necessarily the $1.7 million to acquire the property. It's the opportunity cost of not having 23.77 acres in the tax base forever. I forget the exact number that Amazon, do you remember how much Amazon pays in property taxes and personal taxes every year?
A significant amount. I know the estimate was done for the space at this building, and I think it was estimated if there were a warehouse that were built there, it would be somewhere between $80,000 and $130,000 of tax revenue that would
Come in annually.
come in annually, if it were developed as a warehouse.
As a warehouse.
Correct.
So that's my concern.
Yeah. And the proposals, prior purchase proposals anticipated a warehouse. The one that's in hand right now is fairly large building and in terms, so that kind of activity or that kind of usage is what we've seen in the last couple of years is, two
Right.
proposals come forward.
With
that kind of
everything else
usage.
that's going on in this community, between the fire station, schools, the desire to redo downtown, to take, 23.77 acres out of the tax base seems, it's not very appealing.
Understood. Janice, did you have?
Yes, I have concerns about it too. When I looked into it, I thought initially, my first reaction was that was a lot of land for that kind of money, and then I thought about where it was. Then I went up and looked at it, and the railroad passes along one border, and there evidently has been some discussion about a spur being constructed there. And the area of the property has a somewhat questionable history because of dumping of unsavory materials there. I won't go flatly to say that they were worse than that. But there were test pits done there. And the chemistry came back clean. It was tested for probably the primary 100 pollutants. And so it has not been contaminated. But it's an awful lot of land for that kind of money. And I've thought about it quite a bit, and I finally decided that better the town should own it than someone else. But I have kicked it around a lot. I never did see the soil logs, so I don't know how buildable it is, because they had not been presented as yet. And I thought, well, what the heck are you waiting for? Any client that I ever dealt with, and I certainly was not primarily dealing with clients, would have been screaming for the results at least a month ago. So it's got kind of a fuzzy aura about it. However, as I say, I finally decided that better the town should own it, and it was a very reasonable price. So I would be in favor of the motion.
I was just looking to this side of the room to see if yeah, Tim.
If the request was written in such a way that the town was purchasing it in order to have some sort of control over what type of business or what type of development was gonna go in there, but the objective of buying it was to return it to,
Passive open space.
well, no, return it to the tax base. Right now, they're saying they're gonna use it for space, passive recreation, and development up to 8 affordable low-income dwelling units. There's no tax income in that for the town. So the opportunity cost of this acquisition for the community is huge.
On the order of 80 to, what'd you say, 80 to 1?
I think it's 125 was the high end of the estimates that got put together.
Right, so you
On
do
the
that.
order of $100,000 annually.
Yeah, and that will just go up. You know, it's not gonna be $100,000 every year. It's gonna go up every year depending on what type of business you get in there. Somebody comes in and puts in robotics, and all of a sudden you're taxing, you know, a warehouse full of robotics, and that tax number goes significantly higher. You know, and you're looking at something over the next 20 to 30 years, you're talking buying something for $1.7 million. It's gonna take $3 to $5 million out of the tax revenue for the community. So the overall opportunity cost is enormous. And from an appropriation standpoint, from a budgeting and tax standpoint, I'm just not comfortable recommending that the town, I just don't think it's financially responsible.
What I worry about with it is what's next with it. The town buys it, and then what? And not just, you know, in pure dollars, but also in work hours, and what is DPW gonna have to do? What will we have to do something with it? You know, every time I drive by White Cliffs, I just,
Yeah, what's the
you know,
ownership cost of
yeah,
23.77
yeah, we're gonna
acres?
be buying a whole bunch of land, and what are we on the hook for? And what don't we know about what's coming our way? And you know, does it even make sense to build 8 affordable low housing, income housing units in a place that's pretty isolated? I don't know. You know, so I've had concerns about this one from the beginning too, but I worry a lot about what we don't know.
One thing on that, Jeff, you know, one of the ideas is if, as an extension of the trail system, you know, you put in a parking lot there, so there would be some nominal cost for establishing a parking lot. You know, there would be projects on that
Right.
property
Yeah.
to support the passive recreational use. So, yeah, there would be some number of projects that the town would need to continue to work. Yeah, Tim?
I mean, I would also be more comfortable with this too if it was noted that this acquisition was going to be used and allocated towards the MBTA community space. And we were going to supply, 50 acres for the MBTA community space. If this 23.77 acres was being allocated towards meeting that, I'd be more comfortable with spending the money. But again, it's just $1.7 million for 23.77 acres that are gonna have a parking lot for trails. Like, it's,
It's not
there's so
generating
much other
revenue.
things that the community could do with that land. I understand everybody wants a green space. I understand the position that people have in wanting to buy it. But the cost on the other side is just so great.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, Janice.
I think I'm the only one sitting here that has been involved in developing. We owned where Tall Pines is.
Okay.
And we get, in accordance with the subdivision bylaw, we gave to the town 5 acres. My husband and I made a very conscious decision that 5 acres would be located along Route 20, which was commercially zoned.
Okay.
And there it is. I am not convinced that it is totally protected and cannot be developed, because who knows what bylaw changes will be made. But we at least felt that we had done something toward providing a piece of open space that goes down to Little Pond
Okay.
and could be a park, is available for hiking. So I've been through this open space thing. And, you know, we bought 181 East Main Street. It was a white elephant. Surrounded by about 70 acres, some of which the state took for flood control, because we went down to the Aspet in the back. Some of which we eventually developed, and some of which is open space. So I frankly can't imagine that anyone would want to live out there in the boonies that far, and they've got, if they're in low-income housing, everybody has to have a car. There's no bus going by there. I don't know, but I would prefer the town owning it to it being developed as another warehouse, so.
Gotcha. Yeah, and this has been an interesting one for me, and I may find myself voting one way tonight with my appropriations hat on, and I may vote slightly different at town meeting with my resident hat on.
Yeah,
I find myself split in some ways. With the appropriations hat, and you know, kind of the point that Tim brings up, you know, we have an opportunity of revenue producing land that's in an industrial zone, you know, so the uses that are zoned for that, you know, has commercial opportunities that would generate revenue for the town.
Did we get any feedback from the residents in that area of Whitney Street about this?
There were some public comments as they went through Community Preservation Committee. And some folks spoke out, you know, in favor of protecting that land
Property.
for open space use. Yeah, let me leave it at that, because I don't want to overstate what I recall from some of the public meetings. All right, we ready to take a vote on this one? This is a good one, good discussion. Appreciate everybody's input. So for Article 40, the acquisition of 432 Whitney Street, the motion is to recommend approval. We'll take our vote on that. All those in favor? You can do it, Jen, that's fine. And,
I'll be the one in favor.
no, we're good to see it. And all those opposed? So in a vote of 1 to 5, the motion to recommend approval does not pass. Article 41, soundproofing for the pickleball courts. Is there a motion?
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend the soundproofing of outdoor pickle courts at Ellsworth McAfee Park.
Thank you, Tim. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on the soundproofing? All right, we'll take our vote. All those in favor? That motion passes unanimously. Northborough Affordable Housing Corporation, Article 42.
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 42, Northborough Affordable Housing Corporation.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion on that? Looks good. We'll take our vote. All those in favor? That motion passes unanimously. 43, restoration of the First Parish Church steeple.
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 43, restoration of First Parish Church steeple.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Thank you, George. Discussion on Article 43.
I do. I submitted something, and it was basically my opinion, and I made 5 points, but they all tied to one static thing, and that is that I don't believe that public funds should be put toward private institutions. I'm just against that. I'm okay with using public funds for public property. It's just in this particular case, it's going to the Unitarian Church to benefit the Unitarian Church. I was okay with the one with 58,000 because it was disabilities and it was a ramp, and we have a Disabilities Act in this state. And, you know, it's okay to have that because that's an issue where, you know, you have people trying to access a church or a public, you know, office space or something like that. But this is private. This is something that just benefits the Unitarian community. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's open to the public. I know that they have been closed to certain people, and that's their right because they are a church and they have the right to refuse public access. But that doesn't make it means that it's a public facility. It's semi-public when they want it to be. To fight these arguments, I figure, just keep it separate. Public funds for public property and not for private use. And that, so I'm not going to support this.
Yeah, Tim?
Along those same lines, my thoughts on it were if Community Preservation Fund is willing to put $210,000 into that church, they should be open to putting $210,000 into and every possible religious belief, including if you want to be a Satanist in your backyard, you call up the CPA and say, I want $210,000, and the CPA should fund your church. If you're going to do it for one belief system, you'd have to therefore do it for every single other belief that there could possibly be in town.
That was one of my 5 points that I put in here. Yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah, let me get Janet's next.
I agree with him completely. And what are there, probably 10 churches in town? Easily. Yeah.
And probably even if you looked at ones that limit, the subset of those that meet the historical requirements,
Yeah,
you'd probably still have the same
half a dozen.
comments.
I don't know how old the Episcopal Church is next to Z, but, you know, that's one that came immediately to
Not
mind.
very,
But just as an example, you know, we give
25 maybe.
$210,000,
But
what's going
there's-
to stop them from, and they
there's-
should.
yeah, and there's a Baptist church that this is where the original founder lived, and this was brought up.
Well, to me, they're all special landmarks. If it's a temple, if it's a church, anything like that, they're all special landmarks. This doesn't make it more special or anything like that. And that was go ahead.
Jeff?
Well, and at town meeting, when that ramp was approved, I was a no vote for the same exact reason. And I think about Trinity Church, another very central to our town events, very open and welcoming. I don't think they'd ever ask us
No, they haven't.
to do it. I mean, they would raise the money. If they need the money for anything new in their building, they would raise the money in their congregation because that's what churches do. And because I do recognize that what's special about this church is that it is a historic building, right? This has very high historical value, which means, because as someone who, I myself own a property of historic value, so I'm a steward. It's my responsibility not to knock it down. It's my responsibility to upkeep it. And in the same vein, it is this congregation's responsibility to keep it up. And I agree that using public funds to do that is not the way to go, because this town has a lot of historic properties, and no one else is asking maybe, but would it be appropriate? No, I don't think it is.
So I submitted 5 points. Maybe they're strongly toned. You guys can review it, and if you want to put your comments in or whatever, however you vote, you can change it. But I just submitted it to you, and that's
Yeah,
my opinion.
and I shared it with the chair, so.
Yeah, I think, I don't think it's necessary for us to have to put much in terms of explanation for our votes. So if it's something that you think rises to the occasion to put in our overview or summary of the report, we can, but we're under no obligation to
Okay, I didn't know that.
make explanations on that.
Just a procedural question. If we recommend no, does somebody have to state why
No,
we aren't recommending? We can just say, we aren't recommending, we don't have to provide
What
any.
typically happens is the moderator calls for the recommendation from
Right.
the various boards and committees. It could come through the public discussion, if, someone to ask.
oh, yes.
And
that-
so, in that case, preparation to, discuss our votes. And I'm comfortable that no matter which way I vote on something, I can represent the consensus of the committee. So I would reflect on the thing, I would summarize, the points we've made right here.
Yeah, I'm just going by with the past, when Elaine Kelly was running the committee, she would say, well, can you put in a rationale for no in my report so people really know why you're voting no? I mean, it was a nicety, so people would know,
Yeah.
instead of just a static, no, I don't like it.
And we're talking about it right now publicly, that anyone can go back and listen to anytime they
Yeah,
want
but
to.
do they, everybody's at the
Will
meeting.
they? Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
All
true.
3 people watching right now.
Right, no, I think, and I concede that it is, and this is what I think will come on the other side of this debate in town meeting, is that it's a legally permissible use of these funds. But that doesn't mean that it's the right use for the
Right.
funds, and so that's.
I'm agreeing with you.
It sets a bad precedent.
And if the committee would like, we can have a section in the report that says, the following articles were not recommended for approval, and we could have just the short, but, so, for example, we could summarize what we had talked about for Article 40, 432 Whitney Street. We could summarize what we've talked about for this, so,
It's the committee's report, we can add,
yeah.
the.
And I like what
nature
you
of-
said, Bob, that just kind of, so folks don't have to go back and look at the recording. They've at least got a short statement that summarizes the rationale why something didn't pass.
Yeah, so if you want to share what I wrote, or I could share it with the rest of the committee, and they could just
I'll-
edit
I'll-
or
Yeah,
whatever.
I'll forward that
If you're
along.
if you're
Yeah.
comfortable with
Yeah,
it, we can add it to
in
the,
fact, my apologies. I meant to forward that along to the rest
I
of the
only
folks.
shared it with you and Jason,
right,
but yeah.
right. But dependent on the vote, we can, I mean, if everybody was in agreement that they were opposed to this article, we would
We'll
blanketly add
use
that
as the source
language,
for
but
the statement.
You've been writing good stuff in here, so I'll go with you.
Okay, good stuff. Any other discussion on then Article 43? Ready to take our vote? All those in favor of Article 43? And all those opposed? That motion does not pass, and a vote of 6-0.
So suffice it to say, given that vote, I think we could adopt Bob's language and,
Yeah, it's just, he was so good at laying out all 5, and with explanations of all 5.
Would
We
be
might,
comfortable if everybody was in agreement,
We'll
though. I
sum
don't
it-
want my opinions to be the opinion of all 6 of us.
so I'll send that out, and then you'll see in the updated draft what we did to digest it down, to summarize it down. And so we'll come to that.
the heart of his comments, he presented tonight, though, to
Yes.
say there won't be any surprises. That's-
Right, yeah, I think you covered those very well. Article 44, Aqueduct Historic Marker.
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 44, Aqueduct Historic Marker.
Second. Thank you, George. Thank you, Tim. I should say, thank you, Tim. Thank you, George. Angie's listening. Any discussion on Article 44?
Let's nail this one down somehow, make it theft-proof, right?
And
So it stays.
Chain.
Yeah.
get a nasty dog attached to it.
Something. All good.
I am running out of room in my garage to store them.
All right, all those in
That
favor?
was a joke. That was a joke, chief. That was a joke.
All those in favor of Article 44? That motion passes unanimously. Article 45, White Cliffs Debt Service.
I move the Appropriations Committee recommend Article 45, White Cliffs Debt Service.
Thank you, Tim.
Second,
Thank you, Janice. Any discussion? This is seventh,
Right, yeah.
7th of 10?
Yes.
So not 7 of 10? It decreases a little bit each year, so
Right.
that's nice.
So does the building.
Just to be clear, it's in temporary debt, it's in short-term debt, because we don't know the ultimate outcome for what the use of the building's gonna be, so, if it were gonna be assigned to a private use, we couldn't issue tax-exempt debt for it, so that, we typically, in our borrowing plans, have had to issue short-term debt every year, so we've just rolled this one over, we're required to make a principal payment or a payment of approximating a principal payment by law, because we've had it in short-term debt for more than 3 years. So I've heard it being called a bond payment. It's actually not a bond payment, it's a pay down on a temporary borrowing, but, you know, that's an academic difference.
Yeah.
But again, this would be the 7th out of 10 payments. So regardless, if we did happen to have an ultimate outcome and it could be tax exempt debt, we could still issue debt and pay our debt service payment from this appropriation.
Okay,
So
good.
it gives us the flexibility to do
Yeah.
that.
That's good to have the flexibility. Awesome. We'll take our vote on Article 45. All those in favor? That motion passes unanimously. Article 46, the Administrative Fund for the Community Preservation Committee.
I recommend that Article 46, the Administrative Fund, be recommended.
Thank you, George. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on the admin fund? All those in favor? That passes 6-0 unanimously. And finally, Article 47, the rescission of authorized and unissued debt.
housekeeping.
Basically housekeeping. This
Yeah.
is just, authorizations are on the books for things that are either not going forward or weren't needed to be borrowed.
We know that this is not going to be exercised, and get it off the books. Is there any implication when we go to bond rating agencies, those types of things? Is that something they look at to say, hey, do you have these outstanding authorizations, or is it truly housekeeping?
It's mostly housekeeping. I'm not sure they would actually look at this. I mean, we do need to disclose it to the state every year and balance it, and it carries on our books with our financial advisors and so forth. But I don't think we're actually would be downgraded for carrying this by a ratings agency. Obviously, if this were 10 times as much, they might look hard at that and wonder why we're carrying that much on.
Yeah, why aren't you
Issued debt.
keeping house? Yeah.
But again, it's largely just housekeeping, and from time to time, we'll probably come back in the future if we have savings in projects to do this again in the future.
Yeah, keep it clean. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, so is there a motion on Article 47?
Moved.
Thank you, Janice. Tim, I'll give you the second on that. All right.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Any more discussion? All right, we'll take our vote. All those in favor of Article 47? That motion passes unanimously.
You ruined my day, but besides.
I move that we
See what I can
reconsider
do for you.
Article 9, the establishment of stabilization fund by Assabet Valley Regional Vocational School District in light of relevant financial information that was received after the initial vote.
Second?
Okay, so a motion to reconsider Article 9 by Jeff and then Bob. So this would be kind of a two-step thing, right? We'll rescind our previous decision, then we'll decide what to do going forward, but this would just undo
Undo what we did.
Undo what we did. All those in favor of reconsidering Article 9, our vote on Article 9?
Reconsidering Article 9.
Yeah. All those in favor of reconsidering? And great, we've got that. So that's as if we took no vote on Article 9, is basically what it has. So, for Article 9, do we have a new motion on what we want to do in terms of recommending or postponing our recommendation?
I'm prepared to talk about it tonight, so I move that we, I'll go ahead and make the motion that the committee recommend for approval, Article 9, the establishment of stabilization fund by Assabet Valley Regional Vocational School District.
Second?
So motion is made by Jeff and seconded by Tim to recommend approval.
Well, because that's the way we
Right,
have to
yep,
make this
yep.
motion, and then we'll talk about it.
So let's talk about it, make sure everybody's kind of, understands what the implications are. So the reason to reconsider was then this, since the cap is based on, well, let me have you say it, Jeff, you can probably say it better.
Well, yeah, because they're really, the cap on the balance in the stabilization fund is almost no cap, right? But when we first voted, we thought it was 5% of their budget. And that's a very significant difference. And so, but knowing that it's capped at appropriations annually of new funds into the account, into the fund, are capped at 5% of the previous fiscal year's appropriation, right? So they can't, in other words, the school committee can't approve to increase it by 50% in 1 year, and then it's in our assessment and we're stuck. Right. But they can increase it by 50% over 10 years by just doing it 5% per year. And so I guess my concern, and just think about what, George, we've been talking about, having a long-term plan and trying to avoid these emergencies, all these fires to put out, and trying to have some sense of control of where the tax dollars are going. And my concern about this from the beginning was that it's a school committee, they decide, it's done, and then there is some algorithm out there that determines how much we're gonna have to pay in, even, whether we like it or not, whether we voted for it or not, whether we want it or not, we're stuck. And that's my concern, is that this could become a pretty significant, I acknowledge this year it's not. This $16,000 is not, not gonna break the bank, but I worry about where this could go, because it's another unpredictable expense.
And it's giving up the ability to control. We can't come back, if we approve this, we can't come back and say, hey, no, because of the way this works with the 12, 13 towns that are part of the regional things. So it's giving up a little bit of control over town finances that maybe we don't want to do, at least at this level. I mean, if the cap was half of that, maybe we could think about it, if it was like, 2.5%, if it was prop 2.5 kind of thing. But 5%'s double, and it's gonna grow, that can grow really fast over multiple years.
But I don't like that they don't have to come back to the towns
Yeah.
each year to appropriate new funds. That's the part that is sticking to me.
Yeah.
Is that they don't have to come back and ask for it. That this is pretty much like we're about to squeeze the tube of toothpaste and you can't put it back in.
Yep.
So once this is started, that's it. And then whatever happens, happens. And it could be benign, it could be nothing, but it might not be. And I guess the point is that we'll have no say. As long as is it 50%, or are we unclear about, to establish this, is it 100%? Is it unanimous required for all the member towns?
It says a majority of the local appropriating authorities of the member municipalities, which
Could
is,
establish, okay, so just a majority.
yeah.
Just one question to make sure I've got maybe like the two scenarios clear. So with a stabilization fund, the school district would come forward and say, we're using this stabilization, this fund this year on these projects. You know, they would just say, hey, we've allocated our amount to these projects. Opposed to what they would do now, where they'd say, these line items in our budget are our planned capital improvements. And we might then have some say of, oh, I like that budget, I like that capital project, but not that capital project. And that's kind of what we're saying, the level of control is that we could offer some feedback on individual projects versus if it was just in the stabilization fund, we wouldn't have that
Right.
flexibility.
My understanding is that the intent was to build a fund so that they could fund capital projects within the repair projects, within the district. So that would have the effect of, a smoothing effect of, if we appropriate a small amount every year into the stabilization fund and they have larger projects, that would avoid coming back for borrowing authorizations for
Okay.
smaller projects.
So a way
and-
of across the years of capitalization, capital projects,
Yeah,
having
that's
this
my understanding of what their
5%
intent is for.
growing allocation
Right.
that they tap into in terms, instead of projects coming up
In,
and down.
in comparison with, I'm sorry, Tim, I'm just gonna talk for a moment more, but like in comparison to the other regional school district that we're a member of, which is the Algonquin, I know they've proposed, they're,
Oh, point of order here, I think we're offline.
yeah, so,
Should I move a little bit more?
are we using the free version of Zoom?
I think it was just this, it detected that there was nothing
Nothing going on, maybe.
happening.
There we go.
I don't think we had any participants.
I don't know if Mitch was still in there or not.
Yeah,
No.
I was keeping an eye on it. And that doesn't impact our streaming to YouTube or,
It said you were at a practice session?
yeah, can you also start the webinar?
Poor guy.
The inaugural run of hybrid meetings, we're learning as we go.
Sweet.
Great, and there was nobody that had, we'll see if, I'll keep an eye on, or help me keep an eye if anybody rejoins.
Sorry, Jason, you were mid-sentence.
so in comparison to the other regional school district, Algonquin, that we're a member of, I know a facet of their assessment this year has been the capital assessment that we're gonna pay into the district, and they're proposing $500,000 annually of smaller capital projects at the school. So we're being assessed within our assessment for our share of that. They don't have a capital stabilization. I don't know if that would change their plans, if those would be smoothed further, we wouldn't be paying. So of the $15 million that we're gonna be assessed, $242,000 is our share of the $500,000 being appropriated to pay that capital assessment. So, again, I think their intent was to build a funding source for capital projects because they're at the ending of that major renovation project, which the town only owns 7% or 6.96% of the debt service related to the Assabette's building project, but I think that they are probably more averse to coming forward for more borrowing because it would involve so many different towns. So I think that's what their intent is, and I know that the schools, the town approved a stabilization fund for the regional school district. It just wasn't approved by Southborough, so it wasn't approved by 50% of the. So I believe they were going to take that forward again. I'm not sure I heard the outcome of the vote in Southborough.
I did not hear what the outcome was, no.
Is it possible, I understand what the law says and what is allowable, but is it possible for a stabilization fund to be, I don't mean for this fiscal year, because this is what they're asking for, this is what's on the table, but could we have protections built in on future funding? Is it possible for the school district to agree when they come to us with a proposal for stabilization fund to build in some kind of protections that, you know, all appropriations to the fund will be outside of maybe the mandated assessment, and will be subject to each member town to consider. Is it possible to do that? And you may not know.
I
You're
don't
not
know.
town
I don't
council. You
know.
may not know. Okay.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, Tim?
I'd just like to say that I'm not concerned about how they use the money. You hire people, I have all the faith in the world for the Assabet superintendent. I don't think that they're going to use the stabilization fund to go crazy and start building a modern campus at Assabet. I do think they're going to use it for repairs and things that come up over the course of the year, so they don't have to come back. Their roof leaks, they have the money to get the roof fixed. They don't have to go back to however many communities. I mean, you put people like the Assabet superintendent, much like our superintendent, much like the town administrator, much like Jason, you put these people in these positions with these responsibilities because you believe that they're the people that have the professionalism to handle this type of responsibility. And I fully have that with the Assabet superintendent and the Assabet school committee. So for me, it's not, I mean, the only thing that all this discussion brings up for me is, does it create an undue liability for the taxpayer of Northborough? Does it open them up for some, but it doesn't, because it's capped at 5% a year. So it seems reasonable to me. The school's a very unique school in that it has how many different communities in it. And when it needs something done, it needs to go to all these different communities, fingers crossed that all of them are going to approve. And by having this fund available, they can do that and operate without having to go each year to these communities saying,
Roof leaks.
I need another bathroom. Like, just stuff that they need, where with our regional, it's different because there's only two.
It's the rate of growth. And if it's something that's growing faster than the rate of inflation, the rate of income growth within the town, et cetera, and there's no control on it, and it can grow faster, you can eventually get to the point where it's a significant issue.
Right, well, I just don't, I don't
We
think,
have things that grow faster than that. If you look at the rate of growth of healthcare costs, and if you look at the rate of growth of education in general, there are things that have grown to the point where, it's becoming less and less affordable because it's growing faster than the average rate of growth of everything else. So a little bit, I'm just concerned about the rate. I mean, again, it's 2.5 seems fine to me. Having something, that's tied to the general rate of inflation kind of thing is fine with me. 5% seems too high. If everything in town grew 5%, what would that, in our town budget, grew by 5%, what would that do to us over time? And I think it would make the town unaffordable. So it's more the rate of growth than, I have no problem with having a stabilization fund. But I do have do have a concern about not having some sort of control of it growing without any town input. Or
And
growing
just-
too
So
fast.
can I make just one point about that? That's the maximum provided for by law. There's no guarantee that they're going to include this in next year's budget at all. I mean, I assume they would be, but you generally hear from the superintendent annually, and it's a part of their budget presentation. They're contributing to OPEB now as part of their, and there's another contribution they make, and I'm forgetting off the top of my head, beyond OPEB and this, that would be beyond the net school spending requirements, so they're
Paying into some sort of retirement fund as well?
yeah, that would be part of their assessment, paying into the regional retirement system for the non-teaching staff. And again, that's an example of an expense that grows outside of a reasonable amount every year. We don't control our assessment to the retirement. We're part of the pension plan. And to get fully funded, which is a statute that says that they need to be fully funded by 2040, those assessments are going up from the regional retirement system more than 10% a year. But so that's an example of something that is a significant increase that outpaces inflation or Proposition 2.5 every year. So it's part of our budget as well. But to that point, I mean, you will have an opportunity to talk to the superintendent about the appropriation every year. And I mean, the town does have a school committee member that serves on the school committee. And similar to the stabilization fund for the town, where town meetings, the threshold is 2/3 majority to appropriate out of a stabilization fund. It's 2/3 majority approval needed among the school committee, which if your town school committee member is adamantly opposed to something and they're proposing something, it's obviously gonna happen among the other 2/3 that belong to that school committee. But you will have an opportunity to talk to the superintendent annually about the appropriation into the stabilization fund. And in addition to that, they're required to report what the additions and the withdrawals from the fund over the year to the member communities as well. So there should be no secret over, what they're using the money for.
And to be clear, I also, like, I'm not thinking there's some nefarious plot out there. But what I am saying is that, because I mean, I fully trust that they'll use the money appropriately. My concern is that if one of our department heads could just, every year, there was some mandatory amount that gets to come into that department and no one could say anything about it, why wouldn't they increase it by the amount they can? Why would they not grow it? Why, like, because we're talking about, this district is, why would they not want to grow that? Why would they not keep going back to towns when it's gonna be part of a mandatory assessment? That's the part about it that troubles me. I don't think that there's, because that, again, is not, that wouldn't be nefarious. They're just doing their job. They're looking out for their district and for their building, for their property, for their students and their staff and faculty. So I don't fault them. But my concern about that is that there's that magic math that's gonna come and tell us what the hit is to us as that grows by, I'm not a betting person, but if I was, I'd say it's gonna go up by 5% every year. And when you do it, it's not on the original 250, it's on, it's on that new balance, and it grows at a bit of an exponential rate. And it far outpasses inflation. It far outpasses any kind of cost of living increases for taxpayers. So that's my concern. It's not underhanded, it's not sinister, but why wouldn't they do that? Because they can.
Yeah, I would make the point too, as well, that we're paying a small share of it. This is gonna be a larger share of, like, for the city of Marlborough, who's the biggest member of that. So I would imagine the city would probably have an issue if it started skyrocketing in the future, because they would be responsible for a much bigger share of it than the town.
But they wouldn't have any recourse, right, once we squeeze the toothpaste tube? Right.
Well, the fund would exist, but the appropriation into it would be part of their annual budget.
But it would be part of the assessment.
Correct.
There's no
Would
discretion.
Marlboro have any more say than we have?
Well, what I mean is, like, if a preponderance of the communities were unhappy with it, I think that the majority, they'd have to convince the majority to appropriate money into that fund.
Oh, okay, so it is potentially possible that if communities were to say, wait a minute.
Right, they have to have approval among a majority of their,
Each year.
each year, yes.
Okay, well, that's different because I wasn't thinking that.
Is that proportionally broke up? Because Marlboro's a lot bigger.
I don't think it's
Chunk, or-
proportional, no,
okay,
I
so
think
it's
it's
each
just
town.
number of,
Okay.
a number of communities.
Okay.
Okay.
I give us enough info to then. We've got that motion on the table to recommend approval. We've got the additional discussion on that. We'll take our vote. All those in favor of recommending approval for Article 9? have 3. And all those opposed? 1, 2, 3. We are split 3-3 on that, which is no problem. We report it as that.
Can I bring something to your attention?
Yes, ma'am.
Monday, April 22nd, we usually meet at least an hour before town meeting theoretically is going to start. We're now starting at 6 PM, so we would meet at 5.
I was going to ask on that, I was thinking 5:30 to start, I mean,
That's-
even coming into this, but given that we need to discuss a few items,
Yeah.
can we do it?
It's unlikely they will have a quorum by 6 o'clock, but
We need to be prepared for
we
that.
need to be prepared, so we
To start.
usually met an hour earlier.
So,
A lot of muttering.
is everybody okay with a 5 o'clock start? Great, that's good on that, so that would be on the 22nd. So just to make that transition then from voting on the articles, talking about the report, just make sure I have this straight in that we will revisit Article 15, which is the Marlboro Sewer case. We'll get additional information on that, and that'll be one of the items we'll be finalizing, along with Articles 33, 34, and 35, which are the solar bits. And I think those were the only 4 that we're passing there, too. And then in the report, we'll look to extend our comments about the use of ARPA funds to indicate that Articles 18 and 19, as well as 32 and 39, could be considered as candidates for that use, should the select board look to take that opportunity. Then finally, as a result of our going through the votes for Articles 40 and 43, we'll provide some rationale on the vote not to recommend. And toward that end, I guess, if we put in a statement about Article 9, since we were split on that decision as well. So we won't provide rationale for the unanimous votes, but we'll provide rationale for the non-unanimous votes. Does that make sense?
Or the no votes.
The
The ones that you voted no as well on, we'll put rationale.
That's what I'm saying, I'm sorry, yes, yeah, there was so I can't say non-unanimous, you're right. If anything was
Whenever there was,
unanimous approval,
Yeah.
we'll provide a rationale for it.
In Article 40, it looks like just a typo in the bullet, just in the draft. It says 352 Whitney in the bullet for 432 Whitney. Just so you're aware, page 71.
I swear that changed. Somebody changed it back.
Oh, I see it, yes. Okay, good catch there.
thanks.
So that is the good transition into the draft report. I think, Jason, you've highlighted then the items that made changes, our continuation of the budget hearing. I think the statement that the votes were taken tonight still stands. That's still an accurate statement. We voted on all the articles, some of which we're gonna make our final recommendations. You'll see on what is page 55, a draft of that, giving some background and some current dollar amounts for the ARPA funds. It's at that portion in the report that I'd looked at, then insert what we decided tonight about the candidates. And that might easily fit maybe between paragraphs 2 and 3, or might reassemble that just slightly to, but is everybody comfortable with kind of the wording on this, do you see any improvements to make? And if in your review going forward, we'll talk about what we do to get to a finalized report. So I would say, if you need some more time to look at that, especially in light of how we've discussed it, we'll look to get a draft out again that incorporates these elements. But the gist of the report, is basically gonna be retained. Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, Scott, thanks. I guess, well, since we're talking about ARPA, I think some of the discussion that we had earlier, something stuck in me that's bothering me about some of the comment that was made, that we don't have enough time to make a judgment. I mean, we just got these articles. I mean, how do we make a judgment call before we know what those expenditures are gonna be to recommend that these should go to ARPA? So I'm not too sure about this whole timing thing that's being spoke about, that it's too late to do something. If we knew ahead of time, obviously, what the expenditures were, we could recommend this should go to ARPA, but we just got these.
Right.
So I don't understand the timing discussion
Yeah, I can
there.
understand a little bit in that last year, there was, during the presentation of the financial plan, the capital plan items, there was a column for there was a separate column for ARPA on recommended funding sources, and there was an allocation put forward by the departments or the committees and all that. We didn't have the time to do that, and there wasn't, the discussion of that in preparation for those meetings. I don't think it's too late. I mean, in fact, I would even go as far as to say, and this is a personal opinion, I think it is long overdue to have a plan for the ARPA funds. So
agree.
in that respect, it is late, not that it's too late.
December's gonna be too late, after December.
Right.
Right, so that's what too late is.
And
We've been talking about this for over a year, so.
for several years. Right?
So were these things not in that discussion, that we're recommending these things now, but weren't they discussed in that previous?
So the other boards, committees, commissions, and town departments didn't have an opportunity to put forth their recommendations. There was some additional recommendations made and if I passed along the memo from the town administrator on their recommendations.
Okay.
If I haven't, I will make sure we all have a copy of that. So staff has come forward, but once again, there wasn't the formal recommendations either coming up through the other committees or through the staff departments on these would be good candidates.
Okay.
Those discussions didn't happen this year.
Well, I'm
like
glad
they
to hear
did
you
last
say
year.
you don't feel it's too late either, so I feel good.
No, I mean, this is the right, in my mind, this is the discussion on the priorities and criteria and candidates for the use of ARPA money is long overdue.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I say. Yeah, Tim?
I also noticed that, and it was unfair to say that, that if we wanted to make that recommendation, we should have done it when we didn't have the information in order to make such recommendation. To avoid that in future years, is it possible to not have the joint meeting with the select board until we have this document and we've gone through and approved everything? So that way, we are fully informed
Yeah, I think,
when we go to that?
Isn't that date set, though?
but in a normal cycle, we would plan our schedule such that we had a
So we're done.
finalized report.
Got it.
Prior to the joint budget
We
hearing.
should have this document before, in this discussion,
Yep.
before we have that joint meeting with the select board.
Yeah, that would be the schedule to adopt.
I would say this about the discussion about the timeline for ARPA. What's difficult is that the definition of obligation means basically that we have to enter into contracts with vendors to have done things, and then there's bidding that's required before that. So the timeline is shorter than it seems. It's not December per se, it's whenever time you need to do bidding to fulfill
Yeah.
the procurement laws in order to get to December, so.
We are running
it's
out of
actually
time.
We're running out of
a
time.
shorter time period, so, I mean, the thing about the fire truck is a little fraught with that being a target for ARPA funds, just because of the timing with that. That seems like that has potential to be delayed. There's nothing saying that US Treasury couldn't change their rules, because we've seen that as we've gone along. They issued what was called an interim final rule, then they came out with their final rule, and they've continued to update frequently asked questions.
Right. Well,
Nobody at Treasury that will actually answer the phone and give you a determination on a specific question. They publish frequently asked questions, which they could change.
I appreciate that, but it doesn't change, like, then why are we in this position?
Oh, no, Tim, I'm just saying that
Like,
there's.
why are we, I understand what you're saying, but that just leads to the question of, now the timeline is so tight that we may not be able to use ARPA funds for things that they could be used for, because nothing's been done with them for, right?
I think that
A year.
the heart of the question is that look for, try to limit the borrowing as much as possible, and that this is what I'm surmising is that the heart of the question is, let's, benefit the taxpayers by limiting borrowing in the future. Look for projects like the LED light projects that's gonna provide savings in the future and saving utility costs, and also shovel-ready projects.
Yeah. And that, again, leads to the question of why hasn't it?
That's the question I
One
raised.
other, I wasn't at the last meeting where I made some suggestions.
Oh,
about
yes.
how we
Yeah,
should look at things going forward. And one of the concerns I have is, I think one of our roles should be to kind of identify and prioritize between, what are the things that are most important to do operationally, and kind of have an idea of where things are going. And, this year was particularly bad, and, one of the things is we added 6+ positions in the schools, and that was better than the 13 they were asking for, but I don't know what the justification for the 6 was, really, kind of thing. And I don't know how their justifications went against what, our fire department's looking for. And how do we prioritize those justifications? And we really need to make sure that we're kind of getting that information at a point where we can start to weigh them, and particularly if it, I think for us to really effectively do what we're supposed to do as our role, meeting our mission, is weighing those things a little bit and saying, look, this is important, but this is more important, and also managing. I'm uncomfortable with how much the budget went up this year, and just because it went up a lot, Now, maybe it's completely justified. It went up a lot, and it went up in a year where we didn't have the time to really dig into it. And that's why I'm uncomfortable. And we've got to make sure that doesn't continue to happen, because part of it is, we don't want to just be a windsock that whatever we get, we approve and it goes forward. But we have to have the time and we have to have the information to do that. So I think if anyone's adding staff, we ought to have that up front, and we ought to know what it is, and we know what the justification is, so that we can kind of weigh, additional math personnel in the school district versus an additional patrolman or an additional EMT crew or whatever. And we need to kind of be able to do that. And this year, we didn't have the information to do that effectively. And so I'm hoping that, a lot of what I did in that was not anything that affects this year, and I don't even think it needs to go into, this report. But I think setting the stage, once we're through town meeting and everything else, we ought to be talking about how do we do this a little bit different, see if we can kind of incorporate some of those suggestions into the process next year, right up front, so that, we do our job better. I'm not saying I got it entirely right in there, and, we can kind of go through it at some point, but should we be looking at how do we improve the process?
Right.
And I
Well, it's
think-
almost like if department heads were to present their budget year budget.
Yeah.
But in their presentation, they also have a estimated 5-year budget that has staffing growth built
Right.
into it. You're not held to it by any stretch. If it doesn't happen, if it's more, if it's less, whatever it is.
Right.
But at least so we can look at it and say, all right, in 3 years, this department is gonna need to increase staff by this amount because this is gonna grow by this amount.
Right. And make sure that we're not heading for kind of hitting all of a sudden a whoops.
Yeah.
I mean, in the week after that came out, there was an article in the Globe about the Boston school budgets. And now their budget is 1.2 billion, but they're cutting like 100 positions and stuff. How did they get to the point where they've got that far out over their skis that they have to contract like that? And how do we avoid ever getting ourselves into that point? And we can't do that unless we do exactly that. Look, what's coming? How's it going to grow? How much growth can we stomach?
What's the tax impact?
Yes, exactly. And get an idea, and it may be that it's much better to kind of control it a little bit early than wait till you get in a position where Boston is right now, where it's like, oh, well, now everyone's going to hurt. And it just like, well, I want to make sure we avoid that.
Do you think the kind of model we talked about with the growth in staffing the police department,
Yeah,
right, where it kind of, it's going to be a projection of an increase in $250,000 each year, and that
Right,
personnel
right.
projection, if that was a technique used for other departments as well, that shows personnel projections, significant budget projections
right,
in that kind of
Right.
forward-looking like we see in the capital plan as well, right? That if that's an ability for the things that are known, and there's always gonna be some that's unknown, but that
Right,
anything that can be foreseen by the department in terms of personnel projections. I know we've got another, a short description from the town administrator of other positions that are under consideration for growth, so a personnel projection on that, if we look to bring on an economic development staff member, for
Right.
example, those types of positions, I think there's a few that town administration has outlined that are likely to see next year or in upcoming years.
The challenge you run into, if you just look at those in isolation, it's like, well, of course we need that. And then you do it. And then you kind of forget about it. And then it's like, well, of course we need this. But then all of a sudden, you begin to realize, hey, it's all adding up. And now we're, like I said, over our skis.
And to forecast
and-
it
right.
and bring it on board that additional
You've
personnel.
got 10. Of course we need that.
Yeah, it's too easy to do that.
Yeah, I would say one thing that was less than ideal this year is the one thing that's been helpful every year has been the financial trend.
Say what?
Which is the financial trend
Yeah.
process that we've done in prior years.
Yeah.
And obviously, there just wasn't time to do it this year.
Yep.
Whereas we do look at a multiple year, 5-year projection into the future, whether it's ever likely that the budget will only go up 3% in former years, we can at least look at what the impact of making some assumptions like that going into the future.
That's
But
right,
you-
and-
You're not wrong, but like this year, we were not informed by how long our levy capacity is gonna go without needing a
Yeah,
Proposition
we made a
2.5 override.
significant dent in our levy capacity this budget.
Correct,
And we
yeah.
can't count on doing that.
And it's not likely to go back up again quickly because the town did benefit from a lot of economic development during a period of time when
Right.
it wasn't happening in other places. So that $4 million was a lot, but it's probably not gonna build back up again in the future. So we're managing the decline of that levy capacity over time, and
Right.
is it 3 years with the trajectory that we have? And again, to the extent that we always do large building projects as debt excluded projects, I mean, that's one of our financial policies, so it doesn't affect our levy capacity, but it's taxpayer impact, whether it's exempt or not from
Right,
Proposition 2.5, it's taxpayers funding that. So going into the future, having a clear set of expectations, because the trajectory has changed somewhat with the building projects being larger and inflation and the budget this year. And again, on the town side, that's where we focus most of our time, because when I came back and working with Tim, the school budgets were mostly all voted. Those used up all of the new revenue that we would have. We have about $2.5 million of revenue every year. So
Yeah.
then the town's fixed costs, obviously, I'm just repeating numbers that were in the presentations in the past, but the fixed costs went up $1 million, and then the town's budgets went up $1 million. So that was $4.5 million, and we're only growing what's legally taxable by $2 million a year. So we're drawing down that balance. So
Yeah.
whether it's 3 years, whether it's 5, or whether it's 10, we need to start looking at that, especially if we start adding in more staff the year after that. So
Right.
again, to that point of everyone in a vacuum, you need it, there's $400,000, but that escalates over time if you keep adding that. And it's in the base now, but it will be there next year as well. It'll be an increment on that next year.
Yeah, Tim?
Would it be possible for our June meeting to have this discussion
Have
in
the-
more detail?
That would be great.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that idea, and that's
That's a very good
what-
idea.
There are some initial proposals of not skipping the financial trend altogether, but getting back to it toward the end of the year, so that would be appropriate for us to bring
Yeah.
that back up again, or that to come up before this board as well.
Yeah. And just make a list of things that we would like to see from department heads and
Right, right.
what our concerns are with the process and how we can improve it and.
Yep, that sounds good.
That'd be a great time to do that, and that.
Or
that
after
should
the
give the time
process.
for us to decide and, manage the process, It was obviously, when we started this year, it was too late to even consider any of these things, but, so this is future thought. So I think that's a perfect time to do it. We'll have been through the
There'll be nothing for
town
us,
meeting.
nothing else
yeah,
for us to
kind
do,
of thing,
so
and,
we will approve some year-end transfers and then.
yeah.
That sounds good. And then, so to move forward on the report, I just need authorization from the committee to make the finalizations and to work towards the deadline of, that
It's
meets
the
the
ni-
publication.
The 9th is the absolute drop dead deadline, where we need to get the entire warrant book to the printer.
So what I'll look to do, and-
Drop dead?
and Jason, I will have some updated verbiage in the morning.
Okay.
And so if you think about incorporating the results into the bid, I'll look to incorporate the ARPA candidates, the rationale, make some adjustments that way.
Okay.
But, so I would just need a motion that approves that the
I
chair.
move that the committee authorize the chairman to submit an annual report.
Moved
Second.
by Janet, seconded by Tim. All those in favor? Take that, Janet, you were a yes on that. I assume. And
Good at moves, motions to adjourn.
you ready for that one? That one. Go ahead.
Would the chairman entertain a motion to adjourn?
Yes, ma'am.
Second?
Ennis and George. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Folks, thank you very much. I appreciate all the work on this. See you later.